She had no army, no throne, no political power of her own. She was, by all accounts, a woman backed into a corner, exiled from her own kingdom, hunted by her own brother with nothing left to lose. And yet, within months she had Julius Caesar, the most powerful man on earth, wrapped around her finger. And when Caesar fell, she did it again, with Mark Antony, the second most powerful man in Rome. This was not luck. This was not beauty. This was a calculated, precise, almost terrifyingly intelligent psychological operation, planned and executed by a woman who understood human desire better than anyone in the ancient world. Today we're going to break it down, step by step, like a detective reconstructing a crime scene, except the crime was genius. Before we talk about manipulation, we need to kill a myth. Most people picture Cleopatra as an exotic, seductive queen, the image Hollywood sold us for decades. Elizabeth Taylor in golden jewelry, a woman whose power came from her looks. That picture is almost entirely wrong. Here's what the historical record actually tells us. Cleopatra was, first and foremost, a scholar. She spoke 9 languages, including Egyptian, which none of her predecessors in the Ptolemaic dynasty had ever bothered to learn. She studied philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. Ancient sources describe her voice as an instrument of many strings, meaning she could shift her tone, her register, her entire personality, depending on who she was speaking to. She was also a student of power. She had watched her father beg Rome for military support his entire reign. She had seen how quickly loyalty collapsed without leverage. She had been exiled by her own brother at age 21, thrown out of the kingdom she was born to rule. So when Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BC, Cleopatra didn't see a conqueror. She saw an opportunity, and she moved faster than anyone expected. Here's the first clue that what happened with Caesar was no accident. Caesar was at war. He had just arrived in Egypt chasing his rival Pompey, who had already been killed. He had no reason to get involved in Egypt's internal politics, no reason to care about a young, exiled queen. And yet, Cleopatra found a way to get inside his private chambers, wrapped in a carpet, according to the most famous version of the story, delivered directly to him as a gift. Was it really a carpet? Historians debate this. Some say it was a linen sack. Others say the carpet story was invented later for dramatic effect. But here's what isn't debated. Cleopatra smuggled herself past her brother's guards who would have killed her on sight, and appeared before Caesar alone, unannounced, completely at his mercy. Think about the psychology of that moment. Caesar was a man who had conquered Gaul, who had crossed the Rubicon, who had faced death more times than he could count. He was not easily impressed, but a woman who risked her life just to speak to him, who outmaneuvered an entire palace guard with nothing but her own nerve. That got his attention. And attention, as Cleopatra knew, was the first step. Within days, Caesar had switched sides. He was now fighting for Cleopatra against her brother. The most powerful military force in the Mediterranean was suddenly working for a woman who, 72 hours earlier, had been hiding in a sack. Getting Caesar's attention was one thing. Keeping it was another problem entirely. Caesar was a man who had been with many women. He was charming, restless, easily bored. His wife was in Rome. His political allies expected him to return quickly. So what did Cleopatra do? She didn't compete on the terrain where she was weakest, romance. Instead, she repositioned the relationship entirely. She became Caesar's intellectual equal, his political partner, his guide to Egypt's ancient power. She took him on a voyage down the Nile, a journey of several weeks through temples and monuments that were already thousands of years old. She showed him a civilization that made Rome look young. She made him feel, perhaps for the first time, that he was standing inside history itself. This is a well-documented psychological principle. We bond most deeply not with people who impress us, but with people who make us feel significant. Cleopatra made Caesar feel like a pharaoh, and Caesar, who had spent his entire life chasing glory, couldn't walk away from that feeling. He stayed in Egypt for nearly 2 years. He fathered her child. He brought her to Rome. A woman who had been exiled with nothing had within 18 months become the most influential person in the most powerful man's life. Then Caesar was assassinated, March 15th, 44 BC. Cleopatra lost everything overnight. Her protector was gone. Rome was in civil war. Egypt was vulnerable. Most rulers in her position would have retreated, fortified, waited. Cleopatra went on the offensive. Mark Antony, Caesar's most powerful surviving ally, summoned her to meet him in Tarsus, a routine political meeting, a show of Roman authority. Cleopatra turned it into theater. Ancient sources describe her arrival in extraordinary detail: a golden barge with purple sails and silver oars, attendants dressed as sea nymphs, herself seated beneath a golden canopy, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, surrounded by burning incense that drifted across the water toward the shore. The entire population of Tarsus came to watch. Antony sat in the marketplace waiting and found himself completely alone. Everyone had gone to see her. This wasn't vanity. This was strategy. She forced Antony to come to her. She made him wait. She reversed the power dynamic before they had spoken a single word, and she knew something about Antony that Caesar's assassination had taught her. Powerful men are most vulnerable when they feel the world is watching them. Antony needed to look strong. She gave him a stage, and then stepped onto it first. Here is what Cleopatra understood that almost no one else in the ancient world did. Power is not about force. It's about perception. She never commanded a legion. She never fought a battle. She had no traditional weapon of a ruler. What she had was an almost surgical understanding of what powerful men needed to feel and the discipline to engineer those feelings deliberately, repeatedly, at exactly the right moment. With Caesar, she offered significance, the feeling of standing inside history. With Antony, she offered theater, the feeling of being chosen by a goddess. Different men, different psychological levers. Same result. 2,000 years later, her name is still spoken in every language on earth. The men who thought they controlled her are remembered mostly because of her. If that's not power, I don't know what is. If you found this interesting, the next video goes even deeper into a ruler who didn't just manipulate his enemies. He manipulated history itself. 3,000 years later, we almost believed him. That's Rameses II, and that story is even stranger than this one.